On this episode of the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, we're going to talk staff. We're going to talk about some of the stages that they go through, especially the first 3 stages that summer staff go through, and how we maximize those based on what we know about who they are and where they come from. Welcome to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. We're behind the mic and behind the research, turning insights into impact and numbers into North Stars for camping ministries and the intrepid leaders that serve them. Each episode blends thoughtful theology, compelling data, and actionable wisdom, all to help camps thrive today, tomorrow, and for years to come. I'm your host and producer, Jared Rendell, Director of Innovation and Communication for Sacred Playgrounds. Joining me is Director and Lead Researcher, Jake Sorensen, a PhD-level scholar, experienced ministry practitioner, and the founder of Sacred Playground. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, the support button to help make these episodes happen, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Sacred Playgrounds, and always at sacredplaygrounds.com. Explore with us what God might have in store at your Sacred Playground. Welcome to the playground, camp friends, the cold and snowy playground, even for like Texas and yes, the Northeast, and yes, there's a lot of snow on the ground here as we record in early February, like across the country.
Yeah, except in the Mountain West, they are a little dry this summer, so we need to keep praying for snow for the Rockies and the Sierras so that they get their good snowpack. But yeah, the rest of the country got in a deep freeze here, so hopefully we can thaw out a little bit because we're recording this on Groundhog Day, and the groundhog
true.
saw his shadow. And
Thanks a lot, Phil.
So it's Groundhog Day again.
And again, and again. Oh, it's been too long.
So whenever you're listening, it is probably still winter. That is one of the seasons here in Wisconsin. Almost winter, winter, still winter, and construction.
I love it. There's an infographic of those stages out there somewhere. Speaking of stages, and camp's interesting, right? Like I don't know, like retail stores and things. We gotta think. We're thinking and preparing seasons ahead, right? We spend.
Absolutely.
I mean, camp is interesting because we run hard. We have we do all that we do during the summer, and then so much of the rest of it is really building toward that, learning from, but then building toward the next thing, the next right thing. So that's what we're doing, right? You are in the midst of you're somewhere in your recruiting and staff gathering, hiring process right now, almost surely for most camps. That's what you're in the midst of. So we're going to spend some time today talking through that. We've done, and we'll try to link a couple of them. We've done other episodes around recruiting, around some of these things that we've learned, and some of the ways to maximize that. We'll try to put a couple of those in there. We've been talking with over the last couple of conferences. I got the chance to do a couple of workshops focused on this. As we've done more studies, Jake will lay these out in just a second. As we've learned more about staff, part of what's risen up is just a little more clarity around the steps and the stages that staff go through, because the staff journey is not a line. As part of what, the goal of these conversations is, we're changing the shape of this journey, right? These are cycles. This is cyclical. And we really got to think of them like that. We need to think of these as journey, not at some point they sort of hop on this line and then they hop off the line. And these are really journals, because these are relationships. These are relationships that we have with these staff members. This is a community that we're building. And so if we can think more circle and less linear timeline, that is helpful. So we shift the shape of these things. And some of what we learned through these studies has helped us see these different stages. And so the idea today is that we're going to talk through some of these stages, particularly the first 3 that all of these staff go through in this journey. Again, this lifted up from a few studies, some that we've done, and then there's some additional there. So Jake, will you kind of run us through those, where a bunch of the data that we're going to share about these summer staff members, where this came from?
Yeah. So there's been a ton of research in the last several years on summer camp staff. And so a lot of the early studies on camping were about the campers and their experience. And then they really quickly expanded to the staff experience because there was a recognition among camp leaders and among researchers that staff are participants in camp as well. And sometimes the impacts that staff experience are equal to or greater than, in a lot of cases, what the campers themselves experience. And so
Hmm.
they are participants as well as employees. And so it's really an interesting journey that they're on. So there's been a ton of studies, some of them really small, but some of them really large. And we've participated in several of the large studies. And so the first big camp staff study that we at Sacred Playgrounds did was the Camp and Church Leadership Project. This was with Lutheran Outdoor Ministries in 2021. So right after COVID, we got a lot of the post-COVID hangover in terms of a
Hmm.
lot of the mental health challenges that the staff were going through, the recruiting challenges that camps were going through. We repeated the study with an Episcopal camp cohort. We called that the Episcopal Church Leadership Project, and that was funded by their a grant and their national church. And then we repeated that study again last summer in 2025 with the United Methodist camp cohort. And so between those three staff studies, we have a huge collection of data from summer camp staff, from more than 120 individual Christian camps between those three
Hmm.
organizations, and over 2,000 summer camp staff. We surveyed those staff not just at the end of the summer, we also surveyed them at the beginning of the summer. And so we're trying to figure out where they're coming from, what motivated them to come to camp, those sorts of things. And then we're trying to measure pre to post how much they grew and get a sense of their experience with the post camp survey. So that was a pre-post study. And again, we did that with three of the really large Christian denominational camping organizations, with the Lutherans, Episcopalians, and United Methodists. And then those data that we have are supplemented by all of these other studies. And so two of the big ones that we oftentimes refer to um, are one, the Youth Impact Study that ACA participated in. And so that's been a really important study for Christian summer camps. And they did a large study on their campers, and that was a longitudinal study, but they also did one on the staff. And so there were 250 staff at ACA camps that participated in that longitudinal study in 2018, 2019. And that's been peer reviewed as well. And then there's another study that our friends at Honey Rock did in partnership with 3CA. That included 27 3CA camps. And so that's Christian Camp and Conference Association. They did that in 2019, and there were about 500 staff involved in that. So a couple other fairly large studies that we get some additional information and data from.
That's helpful. You had mentioned, and this always feels like it's a set, this kind of sets the table for this idea, because camp directors agree with that idea. You were talking about how, you know, the staff are participants as well. So we asked that question in the OMC director survey, and
Correct.
we asked camp directors, hey, your summer staff, does your camp emphasize summer staff formation as much as camp formation? And 79% of them said, yep, we do. Right? The majority for sure said
Yes.
yes. We do this on purpose. We emphasize staff formation on purpose. We see them, to your point, Jake, as participants in this experience.
Right. Yeah, that's a really important thing for us to remember. And a lot of you are in the recruiting season right now, driving from college to college or from space to space where you're recruiting summer camp staff, and you're nodding along as you're like, yeah, we care about these young people. These are people that we deeply want them to have a good experience and to grow as people, to grow in their faith, to grow in their understanding of who they are, to develop better vocational clarity, all of those things. You want them to succeed, and you're cheering for them even
Mm-hmm.
after they've been done working at your camps. And so yesterday I was at a site visit for one of the other projects we were doing, and I was at a congregation. And at this church, I encountered two former summer camp staff of mine,
Nice.
and it was just so
I love it.
awesome to connect with them, to give them big hugs, and just to hear about how they're doing now. Years and years after they worked on summer camp staff, I still feel this deep connection to them, and I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who are listening do the same, because you really do care about these people, that you
Yeah.
develop these strong relationships with, and you again want them to succeed.
All right, Jake. So we're gonna dive into these stages in a second, but I'm gonna give you the punchline. I'm gonna give you we're gonna give everybody the point of the sermon right now. All right. So why we're gonna talk through all this is you can maximize every step of the summer staff journey the more that you know about who they are and where they're coming from. Right. So to flip it, the more that you know about who your staff are, where they're coming from, the experiences they're coming in with, that's part of the value of doing this pre-camp survey. We've learned that with campers. We've learned that with when we know where people are, where they're coming from, and we can intentionally connect and recruit, prepare, train, design the experience, send out. The more that we know about who they are and where they're coming from, what they care about, all of that, that makes a big difference for how we maximize those stages. There's the actual point, right? And so we're gonna talk through what's going on in some of these key stages and share some of the data that we've learned there, and hopefully that helps you know a little bit more about who they are, where they're coming from. That's the idea.
Absolutely.
All right.
Awesome.
So again, through these studies and through the stories that you tell, we've kind of learned that staff go through, and I started to lay them out. So I'm going to quickly say the 5 stages or so that our summer staff are going through, and then the cycle continues. So we're going to focus on the front part of these today. So here's what's coming up. So we've got this stage, and these stages are marked by these kind of milestones of the experience. These points where things change a little bit, right? So the first one that we're going to spend some time on today is from awareness, meaning they're finding out, about your camp for the first time. And sometimes there's a long tail because they were campers, and sometimes there's a really short tail because they saw you for the first time at a recruiting table. Right. So at some point they're going from awareness to, yeah, this is for me. Right. So this is encompassing this recruiting, this marketing really, and recruiting, the first steps of hiring experience. This encompasses all this. So this is from awareness to staff agreement. They're coming. Yes. We want to get them to that yes. And there's a lot that goes into that, of course. So we're going to talk a good chunk about that. Once they've said yes, right, that's this milestone point, and arrival at camp, arrival at staff training. Right, there's another phase here. And often we're going to talk about this because this is often the one that we give the least attention to still. And I think there's a change in that trajectory, but we still give the least attention to this preparation phase. We, maybe hit a couple check boxes, and so we'll talk about what else can happen in there. But there's this preparation phase before they actually arrive. They're getting ready. And then there's this usually shorter than on the whole, but really important time about staff training that happens, usually and most effectively on the front end. Continued opportunities throughout the summer are important. And then there's this stage where they're doing it, they're executing, they're ministering, they're doing their job. And then there's this final stage where they are getting sent, where they're getting sent out. And that is often the last few days of camp, but then also this chunk after where they are, they have been sent, they're back there, but they're not alone, right? And they're still learning from and, living off of this experience. And then the cycle can start again, or they get sent out to wherever. So those are kind of that have risen to the top.
I love that. Laying it out into 5 stages like that, I think, is super helpful for us to conceptualize this, and that, this long phase of awareness to agreement, sometimes it's a really long phase, but that's phase 1. So up to that agreement, right. How do we get them there, right? So we want to get them to this stage of agreement in phase 1. We want to get them to that stage of arrival in stage 2, phase 2, and then we want to get them trained in stage 3. And so I think we're going to be focusing on those 3. But mostly on the first 2.
Yeah, that's what we're going to focus today, right? You spent a lot of, and we'll talk about this part of ministering and the skills, and some things like that are coming up at some future episodes. And the sending, we talk about that with, we build post-camp devos into holy ground and these other ways that we, send them out. So we'll try to spend some time talking about those in the future. We'll focus on these first ones. We'll drop some calls to action, in the midst here. But one of the things that I found really valuable in especially my interim executive time was to actually functionally lay these out. Like we did this on a big board. We laid out these phases, and there's some steps in between there. And lots of your church management systems, they're built like this, where there's like steps along this stage. But in this bigger picture, it was helpful to take staff members and put them on Post-it notes and move them along these stages.
I love it.
And so some encouragement right away to build some system around this all the way through these stages. And there might be some sub steps in there that, that you need to take care of course, but build them along these stages so that we're not forgetting them. Move them along. And then as they get back into the cycle. Instead of
Post-its, could I use a flannel board? Because that sounds like more fun to move them along a flannel board to me.
That they have them in the prop closet.
Exactly.
All right. So like Jake said, we are going to dive in here and we're going to focus on these first few stages. So stage 1 that we're going to chat through is this awareness into the yes, bringing them to yes, where they're signing this staff agreement. And so we've got some things that are helpful to know about that. We have a ton of data because a lot of this is in these, like I said, pre-camp survey. There's so much that we know.
Data.
So we had to pick a few to focus on. If you have thoughts and curiosities and questions about, hey, do we have data on this? Do we have data on that? You can always reach out and ask those questions. We'll share what we can. We're going to kind of focus on a few buckets of what we have learned through these studies, what we know about them. And so let's dive in there, Jake. The question often in this first phase, right? So we're working toward recruiting. The question that we often get asked, and so we ask them in these studies, is around, why'd you say yes? What motivated you to come work at camp? And so we've talked about this a little bit before, but so some reminder data and some of what's risen to the top recently, even as recent as last summer when we were able to redo this again.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting is we can repeat the study with a different cohort of staff, and when we get the same answer, that's pretty exciting. And so we got the same answer when we did that with the United Methodist staff members this past summer and got over 800 responses from these United Methodists from about 50 different camps. Their number one motivating factor for them to say yes to come to camp, and this was at the beginning of the summer, they're responding to this survey. So we can really feel that this is reliable data. The number one factor is to have a positive impact on others. They want to have an impact. This is what they want to do. They want to make a difference in this world. We know this about young adults or emerging adults in general. This is something that hasn't changed. You know, we always talk about these generational shifts and how different Gen X or Gen Z or Gen Y or Gen Alpha.
Sure.
You get all these things that people are talking about with generations and trying to define people. Fundamentally, these are young adults. These are emerging adults who are coming into this stage of life, and they want to make a difference in this world. Their brain chemistry is driving them to do this. They want to have a positive role. They want to be seen and be valued and be affirmed, and they want their efforts to make a difference in this world. A lot of times they're super idealistic. That's why those of us who work with emerging adults, we love working with this age group because there's so much optimism and there's so much hope and there's so much determination. Yeah. They're coming wanting to make a difference. And so, are you selling your camp to them in a way that allows them to put their skills into action, to make a positive difference in this world, and specifically to make a positive difference on other people? Because that's what you're doing at your camp. So they want to make a positive difference on young people. A lot of times they'll frame this in a way of, I want to give back because I received so much in my camp experience. So a lot of these summer staff members are former campers. They had a positive experience. They want other people to have a positive experience too, and they know that they can help make that happen. And so they're looking to do that. So this is the primary motivator, and I want you to drill this into your head and remember this. This is why they are going to say yes. There's a whole lot of other things that go into it, but this is the primary factor. They want to have a positive impact on other people. They want to make a difference in this world. You can help them do this. So your task is to convince them and to let them know that their presence on summer camp staff will help them make a difference in this world in a way that maybe other places won't. Okay? Because they have other motivations in their minds too, right?
That's important.
They have to move forward with their career. They have to make money. There's all these other things that they want to be doing. So there's reasons that they might say no to this specific thing, but the reason they're going to say yes is to have a positive impact on other people. There's two other motivating factors that rise to the top just below the having a positive impact on other people. And those two things are, I want to have fun and I want to make friends. All right? So those three things are the primary motivating factors. Impact others, have fun, have an enjoyable summer, and be in community and make friends. And we know that we can help them do those other two things, okay? So definitely sell the fun of camp, definitely sell the opportunity to be with other young people, because they want to meet other people their own age. They want to get to know folks. They want to join in community. Summer staff is one of those awesome places to make community. And so make sure you're emphasizing that, and, show pictures of that and things like that of young adults working together, because that's a big motivating factor for them as well. So those are the top three that I would say focus your recruitment efforts on those three things.
So a big part of this, obviously that Jake's talking about, is part of why it's helpful to know this is this gives us a data-driven reason for the messaging that we're going to create.
Correct.
Right. So it's a huge part of it. Your emails, your posters, the things that you're going to put on, recruiting tables if you're in person, the things that you are going to equip your other enthusiasts. We've talked about that idea a lot. So in the case of this staff, these staff folks, a lot of your key enthusiasts are local area pastors and community leaders, former staff members, right? So whether they, maybe they're returning, maybe they're, so we want to equip those enthusiasts. This is a chance to do that from a staff context. We talk about that with camp overall, but get this language in their hands. Yeah, you're going to create marketing materials, but don't forget to put that in the hands of the people who are most likely to get them to take that step, to say yes, to make the connection. So just remember this, like there are folks to get this into as well.
Right. And so some of these other motivating factors, I mean, the one that always shows up in the forums when camp directors are talking to each other is salary, is staff pay. How much are we paying them? And people are trying to figure out how we can be in parity with one another. I will say and repeat, because we've said this before, that making money is generally on average at the bottom of the list. When we have this list of 12, 15 different motivating factors, to earn and save money is generally last on that list. Now, it doesn't mean it's unimportant, right? A lot of these young people do want to make money, but they see it as less important than these other motivating factors. Mm-hmm. So as long as they're able to, as long as it's not a barrier to them making money, they can see it as something positive. A couple things about this, and we've said this before, but I'm going to repeat these things, is that offering a higher salary does not necessarily mean that you're going to solve a staffing problem. One of the reasons that we always like to do these staffing episodes and to talk about this is because there's been a challenge in staff recruiting over the last several years. One of those reasons is because there's full employment. And so when there's full employment in the country, when unemployment is below 5%, there's a lot of places out there for these young people to go. A lot of people looking for workers, and so they can get paid internships and things like that. And over 50% of our Outdoor Ministry Connections camps said that they were at least moderately understaffed in 2024, the last time we surveyed them. And so we know that a lot of you are struggling to get staff. And one of the things that people have tried to do is raise the staff salary. Like that's going to solve it. And it hasn't. There's no correlation, no relationship between the amount of salary that they're giving staff and how full they are in terms of have they hired everybody that they need to hire, or are they short staffed? So that's not going to solve your staffing crisis. However, it's okay to pay your staff well, and we encourage you to do so. But don't think that that's going to be the main barrier, because honestly, we don't want them to come for the primary reason of making a lot of money. The ones that want to make a lot of money are looking for other options and opportunities. We just don't want it to be a barrier. We want those people who are there because they want to be with other people. They want to impact others. They want to grow in their faith, things like that, for the motivating factors. Yeah. So in terms of how much and the salary, the average staff salary in 2024, okay, so that was 2 summers ago now, was $350 per week. That was the average weekly summer camp staff salary. Now, extrapolating the increases that we've seen, that would mean that 2026, this coming summer, which we're just going to get data on pretty soon here, the average will be about $375 per week. Okay, so that gives you a sense of where the averages are and where you might be in terms of others. Because if they have an opportunity to make, to do the same amount of work and to make a little more at another camp, that might be one of the reasons that they choose a different camp.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got some more, we've got whole breakdowns, and even part of what was interesting is to do a little bit of comparison of returning staff and first-time staff.
For sure.
So there's some differences there in their motivators and some similarities in their motivators. at the end of the day, as Jake said, having this positive impact on others, community, and having fun still rise to the top with those.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But that is a good point that between first year staff and returning staff, making or earning money is higher on the list for first year staff. Staff coming back, that's at the very bottom of the list.
Mm-hmm.
But staff who are first year staff, that's more of a consideration than it is for returning staff. So that's something to really think about as you're thinking about getting initial staff in the door.
Sure. Yeah. So that's helpful. So there's some of the top motivators. Again, this feels really critical for us in terms of what we know about our recruiting strategies and especially our recruiting messaging. The things that really make a difference and the things that aren't, don't matter as much in that lever. All right. So you mentioned something a little bit, Jake. So I want to go here now. And we got a question around this, and so we are going to actually make it our quick cam question.
Quick cam question.
All right, in our pulse check survey, here's what they were wondering, and you alluded to this, so I want to go here and talk about what we've learned, about this. So here's the question: the biggest competitor with summer staff retention is the felt need for internships. Is there a way to compete with that? The biggest competitor with summer staff retention is the felt need for internships. Is there a way to compete with that? You brought this idea of paid internship, and I think there's a couple important things here with that question. Is there a way to compete with that? Because those staff, sometimes returning staff especially, are feeling the need. Oh, I can't do this summer because I got to go do this. We hear that all the time.
So a couple things. One, I don't think it's the biggest barrier. So I think that first part of the question, I would say that the biggest barrier is actually FOMO. It's fear of missing out on other things. Staff are reluctant. Young people are reluctant to commit to a full summer because they might miss something else or a different experience. This is one of the things we know about emerging adults is they're suckers for new experiences. They want to see everything and experience everything. They only have a certain number of summers, and committing a full summer to camp seems like a really big sacrifice to some of them. And so helping them see the different variety of things that they're going to be able to experience is important. So that's one thing. But I do agree that a lot of folks are looking for internships, and that can be a barrier.
Yeah.
As folks are considering whether they're going to work at camp or not. And so my initial response is it's not competition. I think that's I think I want to reframe
this is an important point.
I want to reframe that as partnership. This is a potential partnership. And so if they're looking for internship, great. We can offer that. We're summer camps.
Mm-hmm.
We have professionals working there. We have people who are supervising them. We can turn a lot of things into internships. And so this is a matter of really partnering with career centers and talking with your staff about what type of internship do they need? What sort of qualifications do they need? Because if they're talking about a mechanical engineering internship, then maybe you can't do it. But if they're talking about something in education, if they're talking about something in recreation, a lot of these other pieces, you can qualify as internships for a lot of different majors. And so really talk to some career centers about that. Camps have been being very creative in terms of what they can help their young people do.
Increasingly,
in terms of
I think.
Qualifying for internships. Absolutely, increasingly, because internships are becoming slightly more important in terms of the work field and getting a job right out of college. And so being able to qualify as an internship can be a really important thing, and you can do that for a lot of fields.
I had this conversation as part of what was eye-opening here with a couple of camp program directors from Bear Creek in Iowa. Right, so I was talking with these folks on the way back from the Great Gathering, and we got quickly on this staff conversation, and they have said this has been the thing that has been the most helpful in their recruiting is being intentional about one, connecting with those career centers, and then working with those staff and and their advisors for internship and practicum credit. Here's what it says on their website. These skills are necessary in almost any workplace. We are also more than willing to work with you to ensure that this job can be used for internship or practicum credit for all applicable majors: education, public health, and they're listing this for folks: education, public health, recreation, leisure, youth services, counseling, wellness, psychology, host of other programs. And they're having a great return with these conversations. So
I mean, use each other and really think of this in terms of like partnership, not competition. You're not a competitor for most of these things. You're a partner in most of these things. We are trying to raise up young people and young leaders in our world, just like the colleges and universities are. We're partners. Let's walk alongside each other and let's do this together. And there's ways that, like, career centers want to work with you. Professors want to work with you.
All right. So for that particular question, and then we'll dig in some more. Thanks, Jake. All right, so this just feels like an add-on to what we were just talking about. And so I want to talk about this here. Some of what we learned out of the Campus Church Leadership Project that we were able to sort of mold into, a way that was helpful was out of a question around these career centers. Because we had started to hear from some of these career centers that they were having a hard time saying, yep, go to camp. This is a great choice for your summer. This is a choice that makes sense. And it was because of really a misconception and a lack of knowledge around the kinds of skills and experiences that are highly, highly valuable and highly, highly sought after from these employers, from these organizations. And so that was why we built Camp Builds. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. I mean, Camp Builds, so it's really what Jared was talking about. It's based on this premise that camp is actually building workforce readiness skills. There's been a lot of research, especially with among my colleagues that work with secular camps, really focusing in and honing in on this college and career readiness aspects of camp and how camp builds all of these skills that CEOs and company leaders are really looking for and that they're seeing as missing from this current cohort of college graduates. And those are things like resilience and social skills and all these other really things that camp really does build. And so the four things that we highlight in the Camp Builds campaign are Camp Builds vocational clarity. It helps young people see what they want and where they are called, what career they might want to do. And some people actually change career paths because of their camp experiences, because this time and space at camp allows them to see their own skills, practice those skills, and see how they might apply them in the world and consider those things. And so Camp Builds vocational clarity. Camp Builds faithful leaders. So leadership is the number one area of growth that we see in our studies with Lutherans, Episcopalians, and United Methodists, and specifically leadership that is focused from a faith lens. And so faithful leaders that are then go on to become either church leaders or Christian disciples in the world. So Camp Builds faithful leaders. Camp Builds resilient humans. So that resiliency factor and realizing that I can fail forward and I can do hard things. I mean, camp teaches these sorts of things both to campers and to staff. And then Camp Builds teamwork, the ability to work with others. And that's something, again, that the skill that is missing in the workforce, according to CEOs. And so these skills that Camp Builds align remarkably well with the skills that CEOs are saying they value most highly. And so bringing this to folks in career centers and things like that can be really important, but also bringing it to summer staff members and saying, we're helping prepare you for a life in this world. And we're doing this in this way, and specifically through a Christian lens, so that you can be a Christian disciple and a Christian leader in this world who is resilient, who practices teamwork, and who knows who they are and whose they are and how they can use their skills in this world.
Listen to these stats, you guys. So most of this has been pre-summer survey, post-summer survey. We talked about, Jake said leadership was the thing that grew the most. Campus Church Leadership Project, 95% agreed I grew in my leadership abilities. UMCRM last summer, 98% said I grew in my leadership abilities. Episcopal group the year before, 100%, literally all of the respondents said I grew in my leadership abilities.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a clear headline. Like, not just do we want this, but it works. It happens. It is, is what's coming out of this camp experience is growth in that. And so when you can tell an employer that, or a parent that, or a career center leader that, so those are stats you can sure share.
Awesome.
We'll make sure to link Camp Builds as well, just like, because there's kind of a nice one pager there. We'll link it so you can grab that and use that if you would like. All right, Jake, so we got one more thing we want to talk about in this.
In the preparation.
Yep. Kind of preparation, or this first phase of like, getting into that. Yes. And this actually ends up leading in because it matters for these other two, these next couple stages as well.
I think so. Yeah.
And so this idea of who they are and where they're coming from out of Campus Church Leadership Project, but then continued in these other ones, we learned a lot about our staff's mental, emotional, social health. And I think some of what we learned about that makes a huge difference in these early stages, not just their summer experience while they're there, but in these early stages.
I agree wholeheartedly. Understanding who they are and where they're coming from, and these challenges that they're facing in terms of mental, emotional, social, spiritual health is really important for us to be aware of as we are approaching them and helping them go from that awareness to that saying yes, the agreement. It's really important to know some of the challenges that they have and to be able to tell them eh, what sort of supports there are going to be available for them. So, you know, 20 years ago, we used to, in a lot of our camps, because I visited these camps and experienced these camps, we expected all of our staff to be at a certain equilibrium level, and if they weren't, if they couldn't hack it, they were oftentimes out the door, or they didn't have a positive experience because we didn't acknowledge some of these mental, emotional, social health concerns because of the profile, the raising of the profile of all of these things like anxiety disorder and depression and some of these other challenges, and we've been talking more about them as a society. Our camps have been more responsive. So just to give you some numbers, I mean, so when we do the study of summer camp staff, we have these different markers of mental, emotional, social health challenges, and we kind of count up how many of these does each staff member have, and those markers are having thoughts of self-harm within the past few months, feelings of overwhelming anxiety multiple times per month or more, feeling very down or hopeless multiple times per month or more, and agreeing with the statement, I'm oftentimes unhappy about my life and who I am. So those are kind of our 4 indicators of challenges. And
Whew.
so just kind of counting those things up.
I'm always struck by how those are real. Like we talked about this. I'm bringing
Yeah,
this up quick because we talked about it in my workshop last week with the ECCC folks. Like those are heavy, right? These
those are heavy.
are like we're talking about real stuff, right? And
Yep.
these are heavy indicators. These are real things, and
Yep.
and I think that matters. Yeah.
So it's more than half of our incoming staff have at least one of these markers. More than half. It's actually 60% or higher. So to give you a sense of the last 3 studies that we did, it was 60% among UMCRM, 60% among ECCC, and 69% among LOM staff. And again, that was in 2021, where there might have been a higher mental health concerns.
Right.
But you're looking at a large majority, a super majority, so to speak, of your summer camp staff have one or more of these concerns. And again, thoughts of self-harm, feeling overwhelming anxiety multiple times per month or more, feeling very down or hopeless multiple times per month or more, and or agreeing with I am oftentimes unhappy about my life and who I am. And so 60+% are agreeing or having at least one of those markers. And about a quarter of them,
Mm-hmm.
19% for United Methodist, 22% for ECCC, 29% for LOM. About a quarter of them have 3 or all 4 of those markers. And so we're talking about significant challenges that a lot of your staff are having. So this isn't just 1 or 2 of your staff. You can safely assume that the majority of your staff have 1 or more of these markers. And what this can do is help normalize talking about it during staff training, pre-staff training, things like that. But also while you're recruiting them, while you're getting them from that awareness to that yes, letting them know that you have things in place for them to support them. Letting them know that you're building in rest time, letting them know that you're building in time for them to talk to pastoral counseling or to other counselors, to talk to each other, to build community, to have those supports in place, because that support from professionals and from their fellow summer staff members is going to be critical for them to be able to say, yes, I can do this. Because they do not want to get to the point where they have to pull out. And that might be a barrier for them as they're thinking, can I do this? Do I want to do this? Is this something that I want to put myself through, knowing that this is going to be a challenge? Because being on summer staff is a challenge, right? It's a big challenge. So helping them say yes to that, letting them know about these supports can help them do that.
This I like already. Like we're getting as far as a reframe of it can actually be a sell. It can actually be a marketing piece.
Agreed.
This might be the best, healthiest for your own mental, emotional, social health that you could be this summer. My gosh, you've got built-in community that cares, that loves Jesus, built-in support, built-in experience, built all of this, right? That actually might be the most healthy thing some of them could do from a mental, emotional, social health standpoint. That could be part of the messaging again. It could be really helpful.
And I will say, this doesn't necessarily set them up for failure. Like hiring somebody who's had a lot of these challenges.
That's so
What we
important.
can see from the study, from the research that we have, is that when there are supports in place, they feel supported, they feel like they have agency, and they succeed at camp. This was especially true, and I want to
Outcomes.
lift them up here. It was especially true among our Episcopal camps and conference centers. And so those ECCC folks, they have a lot of supports in place in their camping network for their summer staff, and that helped their summer staff thrive, even and especially those who were coming in with some extra anxiety, some depression, some things like that, finding out, I can actually do this. I actually have supports. I can succeed in the world. To Jared's point, this can be a selling point for some people to say yes to camp, knowing that they're not just going to be wrung out and left out to dry. They are going to be supported and walked alongside and given agency, and help them to find their purpose in life and meaning in life, and how they can use their gifts to impact the world. Hey there, camp friends. This is Jake coming to you again with a special message about Campwell. This has become a passion project for us at Sacred Playgrounds, and I want to personally invite you to be part of it. Mental and emotional health challenges are increasing among both our campers and our summer staff, and in response, a group of industry experts founded Campwell, a training course that guides full-time and supervisory level camp staff participants to identify, understand, cultivate, and create a community of well-being. We at Sacred Playgrounds are partnering with the Alliance for Camp Health to offer this training for a cohort of Christian camp leaders. It will be held at Camp Wapo in Wisconsin on March 3rd and 4th. In a 2-day training retreat, you will be guided through professionally vetted training modules and have a chance to engage in fellowship and learning application with other Christian camp leaders. This training is immediately applicable to your summer staff training sessions and your camp programs for the coming summer. It is also designed to help you think holistically about your organization's policies and practices in relationship to well-being. Go to sacredplaygrounds.com to learn more about the upcoming training at Camp Wapo and to sign up for the March retreat. We need you at the table. Keep an eye out for additional Campwell trainings offered in your area.
So again, there are lots of places that we could go. There's a ton of data on this, this pre-camp survey that told us a lot of these things. If you're curious about something, let us know. So good thing we got through phase 1. Well, and the truth is, some of these things that we've been lifting up, this data that we've been lifting up, inform these other upcoming phases too that we'll talk through. So we lifted it a lot up in here, but I mean, the truth is it affects these others. And so these other, we're going to talk quickly about the next 2 phases. Spend less time because a lot of this data informs and affects that. You did it, lifted awareness, you recruited, you hired, you got staff agreements, you know that they are coming. This is an important milestone. And now we need to move into getting them ready for the summer. And again, this phase is often one that doesn't get a lot of energy and attention and function. And so we're going to talk about four things that can happen in this preparation phase before they arrive. So they've staff agreement, they're going to be part of your staff community, and we want them to arrive. It's interesting that we're still in the 2020s here, Jake. Like, we've still heard from camps where this phase got sadly so neglected that people didn't even know, and they didn't show up for staff training because they didn't even know they were on staff. This happened recently.
It's so crazy to me when there's program directors or directors tell me, we're not sure how many are going to show up on that first day of staff training.
Sure.
So this preparation phase, doing this well, listen to what Jared is saying, because this will help you know for sure who's going to show up and who's not. You want it to be so clear that they're going to show up that if they don't, you're worried that something happened, because you know them and you know that they're going to be there and that they want to be there. So this preparation phase is really, really important, because you don't want to be guessing. I had staff members saying, I always assume that 2 or 3 are not going to show up for training. Do some of these preparation steps and you'll know if there's a red flag or something about somebody who may or may not show up. What are those steps?
So here are these 4 things that can happen, and we can get these next, couple of phases, we can get deeper, further, faster when we do this well, right? We can get deeper in training and deeper in their experience. So here are 4 things we think can happen. And if you have more, we'd love to hear it. Right. So here they are. I'm going to give you the list. We'll talk through them very quickly. Number 1 is onboarding. There are onboarding steps that can, should, and need to happen during this phase. We'll give a couple examples here in a minute. That's 1. 2 is training. Some potential training during this preparation phase. There's things that, that can work and things that don't work as well there. So training is a possibility. 3 is culture. We have opportunity to build culture around our ministry during this preparation phase. And 4 is community. We know how much this matters to these summer staff. Community is one of the things that the data says they need to thrive in addition to support an agency. We can start to build that community in this preparation phase. So those are the 4 steps: onboarding, training, culture, and community. All right, we'll hit a couple. Jake, so onboarding, let me just check the onboarding box. There are onboarding things that can happen, right? There is paperwork, and thankfully, a lot of this is electronic now for the most part. And so there are a lot of the paperwork things that can happen, that should happen, can happen in this phase. The main reason I bring this up is because there's still lots of camps. They end up having to take an entire afternoon, sometimes even more, of staff training for people to go fill out the HR paperwork. So much of this onboarding can happen now in advance. It is worth the time to, whether it's, connect with other resources or build these things electronically, build them in. Most camp management systems have them now, but if you're not using one of those that kind of builds this in, there are other ways to do it too. So get this onboarding stuff. Let me just check this box. Get as much of this onboarding stuff done as you can. Get the paperwork done now.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because of how valuable your in-person training time is. So this can happen. So that's 1. We'll just hit that one quick. Training is 2. Jake, hop in here in a second, but training is 2. There are training things that can happen in advance. And we'll make a quick distinction of what makes sense here, but there are things that can happen in advance that, again, are a little bit checkbox, are a little bit, hey, we know we have to do this at some point. There may be policies that they can look at and read up on. There may be other pieces that they can do, either, an online training or something like that can check a couple of these boxes in advance. Now, the caveat here is, and we'll say this probably again, this training in this phase is not replacement in any way for valuable in-person staff training. The most impactful staff training happens in person. Don't replace things that shouldn't be done in this kind of digital space, anything not in-person space that should happen in person. That's really important.
I would reframe this even into like preparation for training. Like this is a taste. This is a dip your toe in. This is a, do these things so that when you come, you're prepared. It's sort of like doing the reading before you come to class and talk about the book and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can get into your future summer staff's hands and in front of their faces and their eyes to really help prepare them for what they're going to experience during staff training. It is not a replacement. Do not say, oh, I've got this online training module and it's, vetted by this expert online training. That's one of the modules, actually. And that means that we don't have to do, risk management during staff training because they're going to do it ahead of time. And so we can check that box and then spend our staff training time in person doing something else. No. Do both. And you can do the risk management thing as a preparation and then also do it in person. And so think of this as a supplement and not a replacement. Okay. So there's some things that you can do in advance, but there are some things that you only want to do in person because we believe that in person matters. Okay. So what are some of those things that you can prep them for? What about prepping them for the way that you guys do devotions, the way that you do mealtime prayers? I'm giving them some of those things in advance so they can start prepping with those things. How about some Bible study things? How about some ways that they interact with campers? Like all of these different things that they can work on and get into some of the rhythm of camp before they actually get there so that they're familiar with some of these things. You can do virtual tours. You can do other things that help them understand the places and the names and things like that. So there's things that you can do in training. In terms of culture, I think if we moved on to that one as a third one, the culture is so important to start to form before they actually get there so that they know what they're getting into. And this is like, focus in on your mission and vision, right? Yeah. What are you about?
Yeah, the first time they see that shouldn't be, the front of their staff training binder or something like that. The first time they see your mission, vision, values, things like that. This is great reading to do before class, because then what's actually valuable is when you wrestle with it and contextualize it in person, right? You get to training and you go, yeah, we're going to talk about this. What stood out to you? What words from our mission statement stood out to you? Where do you see yourself in this statement? Things like that. When you can you dive in and contextualize and have that be conversation, because it's not the first time that they heard it, can really, again, get you deeper further.
And camps do this really well. I remember when I was working, we worked on the Camp Congregation project with Spring Hill in Indiana and Michigan, and they had the Spring Hill way. Like, this is how we act. This is how we do things. It's about embedding it into your culture. It's about your branding. This is who we are when we're here at camp. This is how we do things. This is how we treat one another. It's those cultural pieces that you can really start to get people aware of pre-camp.
Okay, the last one in this prep phase is to start to build community. We know how important community is, so you need to create some space for them to build community. Right, the first time that they know each other's names, again, shouldn't be just when they come to staff training. And so there are ways to do this, right? Some are doing this out in social media space, like where they're highlighting staff, getting some info about where they're coming from, but creating some space and have them help, especially like your leadership staff that are, the same or similar ages, have them help figure out what's the best space for this? What's the platform that we're going to create this on? They know that. You don't have to go figure out Snapchat groups or Discord servers or whatever it might be. Have them help create and co-create the space. We know there's value in co-creating that space, and you enter in and you offer into that sum. And so beginning to create space for those communities so they can start having conversations in advance, and then equip those leadership staff to seed that with summer theme, to seed that with what's going on, what's hard as you're getting toward finals, right? All of those kinds of things. You can start to build some community there.
I would say this is the most important of these, actually. Like, working on helping build community, that's going to help people show up. That's going to help people know, you're going to have staff members who know that this other staff is going through something hard, whether it's a breakup, whether it's a family challenge or tragedy, something like that, or a health thing. They're going to know some of these things before arrival at staff training if they've been building community with these folks. Don't hesitate to offer in-person community building time, a pre-camp, chance to get together, whether that is get together at your camp or get together on campus, or at a regional area, of college students at a specific place, so that they can start to get to know one another that way and break the ice early on. That can really help solidify that community. So there's so many great ways to do this. Definitely find that virtual space. Let them find it. Your task is not to oversee it, but to be a catalyst to get it started, and then to make sure everyone's included. That's what you do. Okay. Yeah. Make sure that there's nobody excluded from that. All right.
Yeah, good point. So those are 4 things that can happen in this prep phase that will help. And again, use what we've been talking about, use some of this data about what we know about them to inform and create that space. So here they are. They're coming. They did it. And now we get into staff training. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. There are a handful of staff training episodes. You can search them, sacredplaygrounds.com/podcast. You can search them up there, and you can find those training episodes from other things. But of course, this is this is an important phase to get them into and get them going. And staff have, we ask them about training. We ask them about, kind of how prepared they feel in this training experience.
Well, I think that's the key here. So when we think about staff training, it looks so different at different camps. I mean, some camps are doing, shorter than a week. They're doing 3 or 4 days of staff training, but that's a minority. So most camps are doing somewhere between 8 and 12 days of staff training. And so in a lot of ways, the longer the better, because some camps are doing, 2-3 weeks. So I always like the 2-week staff training. I think that provides a good rhythm, but you've got, probably parameters are ready for that. So it's a matter of how you structure it and what you focus on. Make sure you're focusing on community building and things like that. Here's what I'm going to give you in terms of the data. So this comes from our United Methodist summer camp study from this past summer. We asked them at the end of the summer, We asked them, after staff training, how prepared did you feel in the following areas? We gave them a whole list of things. The thing that they felt most prepared with was understanding the mission and core values of the camp. That's great. We give a couple thumbs up for that. The things that were at the bottom of the list, though, and I want you to really think about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that were at the bottom of the list where they did not feel as prepared, at the very bottom of the list was leading or facilitating Bible study and or devotions with young people. Okay. So making sure that they feel prepared and empowered to do that, to have those conversations and equipped to do that. How are you making sure that they feel equipped to do that? Another one that was in the bottom 3 was initiating conversations with campers about God and faith. You can see how related those two things are. So making sure that they feel good about being a spiritual director and a spiritual guide, because a lot of these campers are coming to camp. We've seen this in the camper surveys. They're coming to camp with the expectation that they're going to learn about God and they're going to grow in their faith. This is an opportunity for them. A lot of them are going to public schools where they don't feel like they can express their faith in a lot of ways. And some of them are marginally involved in church, or some of them feel like they're in an overbearing family, in terms of faith. They come to camp and they're like, okay, now is the opportunity to really think about this or to talk about this or ask these questions. Are your staff ready to have those conversations? Because those were two of the things that they felt least prepared to do when we asked this among summer staff. The other one that was near the bottom was camper conflict management. And so really going through that and helping prepare them for that. If they haven't worked with campers before, or campers with certain needs that your specific campers are coming in with, making sure that you're role playing these things and you're doing some case studies and things like that, sharing wisdom from returning staff to new staff about how do we manage camper conflict. Don't just do it in one quick session. When I've seen this done the best, it's been incorporated into everything that they do. How are we working with young people when they have conflicts? This is one of the key things that happens at camp. This is one of the things that makes camp so successful and why it works in terms of building resilience and building faithful leaders and building teamwork and things like that, is we put them in situations that are uncomfortable, and they have feelings because they're young people, because they're human beings, and the feelings come out, and sometimes they come out in inappropriate ways. This happens to us as adults. It especially happens to the young people that aren't as emotionally regulated as well. Some of us, maybe not me, but some of us adults are. And so helping them do that and equipping your staff to do some of that conflict resolution and management is so important for the camp experience. You need to prepare them for this because these things will come up. You need to expect these things to come up because we're in a space where we're kind of creating these things. If they're not having challenges, no problem. We'll put them on a challenge course, or we'll put them on a high ropes course. Or, like
parents want those. We learn that, right? They want those challenges. That's one of their best chances to grow. Right?
We manufacture these things at camp in a safe space, right? Put a helmet on and, go out and do some rafting or climb this rock, like canoe around this island, right? And so frustration's going to happen, conflict's going to happen. How are we handling that? How are we teaching our staff to handle that? Make sure you're focusing in on this, because that was one of the 3 things that they felt least prepared for.
Sure. All right. So to put a little bow on staff training, just a reminder that this model of, intensive staff training at the front of this experience has been tested over and over again, and overall works really well when you do it well. It's also not the end of staff training, right? And so there continues to be value in retraining. So to remember that really matters. We've seen camps do that in a couple of ways, and I think any of these can be valuable. One, sometimes there's been retraining sessions partway through the summer, right? So whether you're taking a break around the 4th of July or something like that, and you've got a day or two in the schedule where you can come back, or in your camp schedule where you've got a chance to do some retraining. I also really appreciate like smaller modularized reactive chances to retrain, right? Meaning whether, this thing happened this week, or we know we've got something coming up in the next week. So we're going to talk about this part, right? We're going to talk, we always did this with like camps for folks with special needs. We did some intentional training around, hey, we're going to get ready for this. Or again, this happened this week. And so use those opportunities, think in a training lens that you're continuing to prepare for whatever those next steps are. Think about those as opportunities. So it's sort of stage 3.5 retraining, right? And so you're still with them. These get a little fuzzy, and then as they're doing it, right, and they're off in their role, and that's those next couple stages. And so again, we'll talk about this, their experience overall, and then some of the ways that are helpful to send them at another time in another episode or an article. Jake, we covered
Awesome.
a lot, man.
Thanks for listening,
there's a lot
everybody.
to dive in. We keep saying that, like, this stuff is so thick. There's so much that we could talk about with this. So keep asking. Hopefully, as you are in right now, these early phases, these connecting and recruiting and hiring, and then into these preparation phases, this is a helpful seed to knowing some things about them. Because again, like I said, the punchline was that the more that we know about them, the better we can help them thrive into each of these phases. Jake, when we do this well, just quickly to share our stat of the week, when we do this well, what do we hear from them?
Stat of the week. Stat of the week. Stat of the week.
All right, our stat of the week this week is 91%. 91% of our staff respondents from both the Episcopal Camp Study and the United Methodist Camp Study agreed with the statement, "The camp experience this summer has given me greater clarity on my life direction and career." When we do this well, we see these impacts. We see in the 90 percentile, I mean, Jared already shared about growth in leadership abilities. We see in the 90 percentiles or 99 percentiles in the camp experience had a significant impact on my life. But when we see something as specific as I have gotten greater clarity on my life direction and career, I know who I am, I know what God has created me to be, I know where my direction is going in life, 91% of staff agreeing with that statement, we can be confident that we're having a tremendous impact on these young people that we're serving and that who are serving alongside us in this amazing ministry that we have.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. If you've got more curiosities as you're in this phase, if you've got something you're wondering about, right, you're coming up on a conversation, or if there's a theme to the conversations you're having with these summer staff in any of these phases, let us know. Reach out, and we'll see if we've got either some data around that, or we'll join you in some conversation and ideation about that. We've got some great episodes coming up. We're more than half, my friend.
Wow.
We've got some fun things coming up, some guests, coming up. So we're excited. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to catch every new episode. If this is helpful for you and your organization and your team, follow the link in the show notes to become a supporter of the podcast. Our theme music was written and performed by Weekend Picnic. Find their original songs anywhere you get your music, or visit them at weekendpicnicband.com. Sacred Playgrounds is generating insights, equipping leaders, and connecting partners to help camping ministries thrive. Learn more about what we've got going on, view current research projects, and connect with our team at sacredplaygrounds.com.